Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We are so pleased that you could join us today for this vital conversation, particularly when COVID-19 has led to an increase in female genital mutilation stroke cutting in communities around the world. My name is Dr. Tamari Esho. I'm the director of the AMREF Health Africa and FGM Center of Excellence in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm so proud to be here today as part of the Global Platform for Action to End FGMC and as the event moderator. Please note that this event is being recorded. The Global Platform for Action to End FGMC is approaching 2 years old. I guess you could call us toddlers. We are learning to walk and talk together as we build global collective action to end FGMC by 2030. The Global Platform for Action to End FGMC was born at the 2019 Women Deliver Conference that was held in Vancouver, Canada. More than 100 activists, survivors, professionals, civil society representatives, community leaders came together in person at a special one-day pre-conference to discuss how we might all collaborate to accelerate a global end to FGMC. Some of you may have been there. We have a short video that we made about the FGMC conference and the beginnings of the Global Platform for Action to End FGMC. We are going to play that video now.
In Vancouver, Canada, the Women Deliver Conference is taking place. Prior to this conference, there was a pre-conference on female genital mutilation and cutting. More than 100 champions and survivors, including civil society representatives and governmental officials from across the globe, united in the Vancouver Convention Centre as a sector to get to know others working globally across this issue and to discuss what is needed to accelerate ending FGMC. They voiced their needs and priorities on ending FGMC and women's health and rights in general. This sector-wide pre-conference event was hosted by a globally representative group of community-based and civil society organizations working to end FGMC worldwide, who wish to collaborate, connect and create shared goals aimed at ending FGMC by 2030.
Wherever in the world where it happens, I have learned one thing, that it's all about controlling women's bodies. So I'm working hard towards ensuring women take back control over their bodies.
I'm passionate to work in the area of female genital mutilation because young girls are still at risk of female genital mutilation. And basically, female genital mutilation is violence against women and young girls.
I'm working against FGMC because that's how girls get equal.
So today we have worked on a call to action on issues that really affect us as far as female genital mutilation stroke cutting is concerned. So we have focused on different areas, that is FGMC as a social norm, and also as issues like research on it and collaboration issues, funding points, and so believe that whatever we have come up with, which mainly is collaborations and really getting everyone involved, that is be it men and boys, girls and women, governments, and all the civil society organizations. And as they come together, we believe that we are going to achieve more. And the call to action this day meant that we working together, we are going to achieve the dream, which is living a world free from female genital mutilation stroke cutting.
It has happened for centuries. And
The pre-conference today was explosive. It was amazing to have so many advocates breaking their silence, talking about why we need to end FGM and to build community.
The pre-conference today was very educative. I've learned a lot. I was able to share experiences, we network, and which is the main reason why we're here. This is why we appreciate conferences like this. It's where activists like ourselves will come together and meet other people who are doing amazing work across the world. Today, pre-conference was really, really amazing.
The FGM pre-conference today was absolutely inspiring. Hearing everybody's stories really encouraged us to take the path to ending FGM. I encourage all of you to educate yourself and to join us in the path of ending FGM. It's a violation of human rights of women and girls.
Tamara, you need to unmute yourself.
Apologies for that. As the video mentions, the outcome of that pre-conference was the creation of a global call to action, which nearly 950 individuals and organizations have signed on to. You'll hear more about the global call to action during the closing remarks. Now let's move on to the reason you're all here today: insight, discussion, engagement. Today's event features speakers from 4 different continents: youth, seasoned activists, survivors, professionals. Some will give short talks in the style of a TED Talk. Others will share their experiences and ideas through a fireside chat format. You'll see me appear throughout the event to introduce the speakers. Please feel free to interact via the chat. Patricia, a member of the Global Platform for Action to End FGMC, will keep an eye on the chat as we move along. I'm going to keep introductions of our speakers very short so that we have lots of time to hear from them. Their full bios can be found on the Global Platform for Action to End FGMC website, and Patricia will put the link in the chat. Our first speaker today is Atas Hendartini, or otherwise known as Ibu Atas. She is a researcher and advocate focused on sexual reproductive health and rights of girls and women. Among her many roles, she is a past member of the IPPF Governing Council and past Vice President Chairperson of the IPPF Indonesia. Please welcome Ibu Atas.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Tamanari. Thank you for introducing me. Hello, everybody. I would like to share my experience working against FGM in Indonesia. It was in 1994. At the time, I was a lecturer at the Department of Women's Studies at the University of Indonesia. And at the same time, 2 of my colleagues went to the ICPD conference in Cairo. Everybody knows that ICPD Cairo started to launch the plan of action for the first time about reproductive health. Excuse me, next. Yes, here in 1994, some of the lecturers, my colleagues, went to the ICPD conference in Cairo. And when she came back, she told us about the plan of action. And there we as lecturer at the Women Study Department asking ourselves, we know that all of us are undergone female genital mutilation too, but they call it at the time circumcision. And nobody knows what happened actually with our genitals. And so my 2 colleagues started saying, why, hello? Hello?
Please continue. We can hear you.
Okay. So everybody was thinking what happened with our genitals. Should we take pictures of our genitals? So some of us, of the 20 female lecturer, made the pictures by themselves, and nobody knows actually which picture is the one of us. So, and then we discovered that some of us miss some clitoris and some labia namora, such kind of thing. And then we start doing action again to ask why we don't conducting a research for the other people. And so we were supported by the Population Council in Jakarta, and we came to the conclusion that in some parts of Indonesia, they do cuttings. So that was the first research we did. And because in our department, we always teach the students about the two documents, not just the ICPD plan of action, but we are teach also the Beijing plan of action. So then more and more people, especially from other university, are coming aware that we should do more to see what happened actually with all the performing FGM in Indonesia. And so finally, we are asking for just put 2 questions in the health survey, and the statistic bureau is agree. And so we got another big data from all the provinces. Next. Everybody know that our population, we are the 4th biggest country in the world. We have 270 million people, where more than half are female, and every year 5 million newborn babies, meaning that about 2 million babies were circumcised, because many were circumcised when they were just 3 days old. So it is in one package during delivery. So about 2 million newborn daughters are circumcised. Next. So what we are doing as women's health activists, it became bigger and bigger, the group. And then we go into the Ministry of Health. And that at that time, it was very easy to be get in, because the authority of the Ministry of Health, some went to Cairo, to the ICPD Cairo. So they knew that FGM is actually belong to one type of violence against women. So the 2 ladies who went to ICPD opened the doors for us, and we had a series of workshops working to stop this practice. So a series of workshops was conducted together, and at that time we already bring some progressive ulamas, that is the religious leaders, to bring in, and they told us that actually who even in the 80s, the practice was not spread out to other islands, especially not the bigger island like Borneo. But who brought it in? It is the midwives. The midwives from the Java Island went to the other islands and then brought in the practice. So that's why we've, in the first 2 years, we are working with all those midwives to stop practicing the FGM. Next. Next, this is a real study what we conducted. People see they are using utensils and pincets and many type of FGM. It is from type 1 until type 4. So, and then we are showing to the midwives. We have a lot of midwives. It is about 380,000 midwives spreading over Indonesia, and we are asking to them to stop with the performing FGM. Next. So these are all the female ulamas where they have their own organizations, and they're very active in publishing all kind of articles about that in Islam, actually female genital mutilation is not obligated. And so we are always using the universities. In Indonesia, we have two big Muslim organizations, the Nahdlatul Ulama and the Muhammadiyah. And we, as women activists who are lecturing at the university, we are always working with the women wing from the two big organizations. So they're doing the master degree at the women's studies. It's not just the University of Indonesia. We have many other universities who has their own women department. We working with them, and through them with the female Muslim scholars, we are trying to convince them that it is not an obligation that the female should be circumcised. Next. And here, finally, in 2017, there is a big, for the first time, it is recognized by the government, by all the organization, that we have the first Congress for the female Muslim religious leaders. So where they also condemn the FGM and should not be performed anymore. Next, that is in 2017. And so that's why if we are talking about FGM, we should see that it is, we should work with the religious, the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and then with the medical, the health personnel, because they still doing, performing, half of them, and even now with the doctors. Why the doctors are so keen to gain financial in this performing FGM. Actually, at the medical school, there is no method teach about FGM, but still many doctors are still performing it, and even some midwives. Next. So finally, we work together with all the three ministries. So the Ministry of Religious Affairs, because they have the authority for so many fatwa, and they are now publishing guidelines for pre-wed couples, saying that if you are becoming parents, you should not perform FGM for your daughters. And the Ministry of Women Empowerment, we are working also very closely with them. Thank you to UNFPA, who are always supporting us. And then working with the women empowerment to the youth, because we are hoping that in 2030 that no more young people will perform FGM for their daughters. Next. Here is the Ministry of Religious Affairs here for those couples during the pre-wedding. They get information that if you are being parents, don't perform FGM when you have daughters. And especially Ministry of Women Empowerment also publishing guidelines for those youth, because we have 60 million youth. So we are working also very closely with all the youth that saying that becoming parents don't perform FGM anymore for your daughters. Next. Yeah, to end the practice, lesson learned, to end the practice of FGM requires commitment from many stakeholders, political commitment at either the national and local level, and all related ministers. We went to Minister of Health for several years, Minister of Religious Affairs, where all those progressive Muslim female religious leaders were asking to be active in publishing all the guidelines for the Minister of Religious Affairs. And we are working closely with Minister of Women Empowerment and even Minister of Law and Human Rights, because this is a violation. We asking the Minister of Law and Human Rights that they have to be actively publishing all those harmful practices. To end the practice of FGM, a Muslim feminist movement should be fueled by not only female religious leaders, but also by male progressive Muslim leaders. They help us a lot. It's time that the health minister enacted a regulation to stop the medicalization of FGM. Besides, Ministry of Health should strengthening the supervisory and monitoring of all those clinics, because during the spread of COVID-19 in 2020-2021 has resulted in people bypassing face-to-face health services because they're avoiding facilities, because they fear that they will contract COVID-19 at the facilities. But what happened? Since 6 months ago, parents could find FGM services online, where the health providers would perform at his and her house. So this is really shocking that we think that the Ministry of Health should strengthening the supervisory and monitoring to stop all this kind of performing FGM. And for this, we are asking the Minister of Information they should stop the online promotion of clinics. Clinics were promoted online, and they are saying that they are performing FGMC. So I think that it should be coming from a feminist movement to stop there. So, and I think the Muslim scholars, especially the female Muslim scholars, as the drivers. It should be a feminist women's health movement. Thank you. Thank you, Tamari.
Thank you, Ibu Atas, for that very engaging presentation. Thank you for sharing how your interest in FGMC was triggered and the research evidence you generated even through the demographic health survey. Also for sharing the way you have engaged with different government ministries, women health activists, religious Muslim scholars, and even specifically midwives to end the medicalization of FGMC, and also for mentioning that it was crucial to engage male leaders also to end the practice. Thank you. Now we are going to hear from young women and youth leadership in the global work to end FGMC in the form of a fireside chat. Aya Chebi served as the first African Union Special Envoy on Youth and is a multi-award winning Pan-African feminist. Alia Harding is a 22-year-old UK-based young activist, youth ambassador for the End FGM European Network. Alia founded Valued Minds, a network supporting the personal and professional development of Black and ethnic minority university students in the UK. Aissata Kamara is co-founder and executive vice president of There Is No Limit Foundation. Aissata has developed and implemented successful programs that impacted the lives of over thousands of poor and ultra-poor individuals, mainly women and youth. Welcome, Aya, Alia, and Aissata.
One second, Aya is having connection issues.
Start video. Ya ada video.
Ya, mereka.
Maybe we can
Hi, everyone. How are you? Apologies for the short technical difficulty here. It is exciting to be with you all. My name is Aissata Kamara, and I am the co-founder of There Is No Limit Foundation, one of the founding members of this amazing platform. Apologies for my friend Aya. She's having a little bit of a technical difficulty, but she'll be joining us very shortly. But in the meantime, very excited to have Alia with us here, who's an amazing youth leader. And we are talking about the importance of youth leadership and the power that they have in ending female genital mutilation. So while we wait for Aya, Alia, I would love to have you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your work, and then we'll get started, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Aissata, and hello, everyone. I'm very glad and excited to be here and listen to all that has to be said in ending FGM/C. So yeah, my name's Aaliyah. I am a final year undergraduate student studying international development. I'm based in the UK. I'm also an anti-FGM campaigner, youth ambassador for the End FGM EU network. So I'd say I've been campaigning, I started campaigning against FGM during my first year at university, and now I'm in my final year. And at European level, I've been with the European network for 2 years. And during the pandemic last year, July, I founded Valued Minds, and we are a student-led organisation highlighting the challenges faced by Black minority ethnic groups in higher education, and we do this through research and advocacy.
Awesome. Welcome to this event. So with that, I want to ask you the question of the state of youth empowerment in your continent right now, and how COVID-19 has impacted efforts regarding youth empowerment. So how is youth empowerment going in your corner of the world?
Well, I'm just going to be real. I think at the beginning, it was very frustrating, especially in the pandemic, where young people were seen as the the group that were contributing to the spread of the virus, especially in the UK. There was a lot of, I guess, damaging media around young people going out and disobeying the laws and guidance concerning the COVID-19 restrictions. But I would say within that, like, I am so proud of my peers. They have been at the forefront of everything that has been going on. So recently, you know, we were aware of the Black Lives Matter movement that has been happening. Young people have been organizing their communities. They've been utilizing digital platforms. So there's been a lot of Instagram lives going on, a lot of Zoom calls. And I guess sometimes we like to kind of talk down about virtual spaces, like, oh, we're so tired of it. But I guess in this digital space, we have been able to connect with people that we wouldn't usually meet if we were going to an event in our local community. So I think within this, it's a unique situation where we have been able to build our network beyond the UK, beyond Europe. So I think that's a positive outcome of COVID-19 from this.
That's amazing. And I am excited to have Aya finally with us. You made it, Fran. How are you?
I made it. Amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Aya. Aliyah was just telling us about how youth empowerment is happening in her corner of the world, but I do want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to our listeners and to tell us what you do. So welcome, Aya.
Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone watching us. This is so exciting and such an important issue we're talking about today. My name is Aya. I am a Pan-African feminist. I served as the African Union Youth Envoy the past 2 years, and I finished my assignment just last month. But I'm continuing on the road where we, started with you, Aisata, and with so many partners, and we're continuing the fight for girls' rights and women empowerment.
Wonderful. And then so, Aya, you represented young Africans around the world, which is a very big kind of role to take on, right? But you did it beautifully. And so thinking about your experience, what would you say is the state of youth empowerment right now on the African continent? And how has COVID-19 impacted that?
I think the state of youth is so unfair, to be honest, because we are the most youthful population in the world and in history. We're 65% under the age of 30. And yet it's a dilemma. The face of refugees, displaced, migrants is young people. And it's unfair to have such a youthful population with so much creativity and innovation, and yet it's not in leadership, and it's the most marginalized population. In terms of COVID-19, I think young people showed tremendous, incredible leadership. in innovation and resilience, fighting on the front line, being, the savers and protectors of their communities, raising awareness, turning their offices into sensitizing labs and producing masks. So it's incredible. I think what we need to do right now is really to take youth seriously. I think we fought for space. We are in the space. We're talking, but we don't want to, continue this tokenism without actually putting young people in leadership positions they deserve, having the support they need to continue the important work they do in the community. I think that's where we're at right now with youth empowerment. Is not just empowerment. Young people are bold. They have a voice. They are on the front line. But it's now, how do we support them to actually make the impact they want?
I mean, exactly I co-sign everything that you've just stated, right? The idea is not that young people are the leaders of tomorrow, they're leading right now. And through the work that we do at There's No Limit Foundation, every time that we engage with young people around any issue, they know the solutions, they're just not being given the right tools. So that's really critical for you to have stated that. And then, so when we think about violence, right, and specifically gender-based violence and violence against women and girls and female genital mutilation, young people are often affected by this. And so I want to ask you guys, why is it important for us as young people to have a voice in these movements, to have a voice in ending these harmful practices? And how do we actually harness that voice? And so Aliyah, if you want to go, and then I'll go to you next.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Aya. I think the point that you made about the the statistics around youth population is so it's so prevalent and it's so significant. And I guess I wanted to build on that. When we look at the gap between the governors and the governed, it's huge. So this is where young people play such an important role. We need to be in positions to have conversations with stakeholders, with people in power, with our leaders, to kind of close the gap of knowledge. And I think as well, from my personal experience and also my peers who are working in the UK to end FGM, we are second generation European. And I just want to shout out all the women before me, because it didn't start with me. There's a whole generation of women before me, such from my personal community. So I'm half Sierra Leonean. So there's people like Sarian Kamara, there's Rugiatu Toure, and then there's also women in the UK like Layla Hussein. So I would say that they are the ones who I guess really did the groundwork, and now it's about us carrying on the conversation, keeping this momentum alive. So I think youth plays such an important role in because we are, I guess, directly affected by social issues, and we are going through those stages. So I think that, it's so important that we have these spaces to kind of yes, inform our leaders, but also we're in an important role where we are also where we're facilitating intergenerational discussions, right? Where we are aware of what our maybe our cultural beliefs are concerning FGM, and we are like middle people in facilitating discussions and really creating community led movements to ending FGM, which it should always be. It should always be bottom up, not top down.
Thank you. And thank you for the respect for the elders, right? I think that as young people, as we enter this space, it's important to really shout out and respect the work that has been done by those that came before us. So really appreciate you highlighting that. And then so moving over to you, Aya, we work together on some intergenerational conversations around ending gender-based violence, but then also silencing the gun. How can young people lead in ending female genital mutilation and gender-based violence broadly?
Yeah, very important. Let me first start by, because your first question is really critical. You mentioned FGM and gender-based violence, and we need to say it. Gender-based violence is also violence. Female genital mutilation is violence. Early first child marriage is violence. So when we talk about these issues, we're not talking about various things in silos. The United Nations Security Council should discuss gender-based violence because it's about peace and security, and the AU Peace and Security Council should discuss it because it's violence. So why we have to be engaged as young people, as my sister here said, it is generational. We cannot continue to inherit the injustices, the historic injustices of previous generations, and we're not able to stop it. And so we have to do it. And we always say we want to end this with our generation, with the support of other generations. And I think that's what I try to champion and advocate for during my mandate, this intergenerational co-leadership, that it's not about passing the torch to us. It's not about, leaving us with all these issues and expecting us to save the world. No, we need your knowledge. We need your experience. We need your indigenous way of have done this. We need to learn from your struggles so we can do a better job. And so to me, it's really critical when we organize the intergenerational dialogues, whether on silence and the guns, including, all the issues that young people care about. We said that we should silence gender-based violence for us to silence the guns. It is a prerequisite to, peace, silencing youth unemployment, silencing climate injustice, and so on. So all these issues young people care about. And so when you say guns, it's not only literal guns. We have economic violence, we have psychological violence, we have physical violence. And it is important to have those generational conversations and to bring decision makers also in the space of young people, because sometimes we end up with youth spaces talking to each other about issues we care about, but we don't have the decision maker in the room to challenge them and to invite them on our terms. And that's what we try to do with you, Aissata, with your organization, with so many partners. Bring those decision makers. Let's have that honest conversation. Let's challenge each other. And eventually they will go with a different mindset and they will go to those closed meetings championing our agenda. So it's not us just crying in different spaces, but not feeling we are listened to. It's having those champions, those allies with us along the way. And that's what we did with the Africa Young Women Beijing +25 manifesto. We built the ground up work first. We did the regional consultation. We provided the space for young people to discuss their own issues, to debate them, come up with 10 bold recommendations, put them in a manifesto, and then we went on to the intergenerational dialogue. And we told, okay, UN Women Executive Director, Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security of the AU, the Secretary General of Generation Equality Forum, we explained to them, this is what young women care about. This is 1,500 young people came up with these recommendations, actually not recommendations, they call them demands. And they want you to be the champion of it because you are in action coalitions, you are leading all these meetings, you are in these spaces. And the collaboration is amazing. It's actually inspiring because at the end of the day, all of the elders that are in decision-making positions, especially elder women, they are youth champions and they want things to change for us. So our collaboration, our partnership is also a generational healing that we really need to build on.
I mean, I could have coffee with you guys in New York City when COVID-19 is over, and we could do this for hours. So
I miss that.
Up on that. I miss that so much, but I know that time is short, and I want to ask you both, what is next for your work, right? And I think that we already know what is next because you're both saying that young people have demands. We need to meet young people on their own turf, and we need to make sure that it's co-leadership, right? It's not just giving them the seed, but it's giving the tools. So Aliyah, you could start with what is next for you, and then Aya, you'll end us. But after this, we'll have virtual coffees because I love both of you and everything that you've said.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And so I'm just going to be quick. So I think that for me, what I'm looking next, what's next in my work is addressing the intersecting issues. So recently I launched the FGM on Campus campaign, which basically brought together students from across the UK to think about how can we raise awareness of FGM on campus and provide services and support for students who may be impacted by FGM. And I think with this, usually, just going to use a quick example of COVID-19, when the outbreak happened in China, us in the West, we didn't care because it didn't happen. So I think for me, it's about highlighting the intersecting issues like patriarchy, like human rights, like child marriage, to really allow a wider audience to empathize and realize that FGM is a global issue.
FGM is a global issue. I like that. Aya, what is next for you?
Big question. I'm still reflecting, but now I'm trying to use my experience as youth envoy and my decade of activism to coach millennials and activists who want to work in international development or advocacy, diplomacy and campaigning to really make policy change, because I think there is that gap and we need to bridge intergovernmental spaces. But I'm also continuing to work on the manifesto that we started with our collaboration with Office of Youth Envoy, your organization, ISATA, and many partners. So we're now putting in place a collective. We called it the Nala Feminist Collective to push for those 10 demands. So you can visit nalafem.org and sign up to receive updates for the launch and also for challenging the Mexico Forum, which will happen in a few days. And I really want to end with, as we're talking about intergenerational, with a tribute to Nawal Saadawi, who left us this week, a bold, badass, legend, feminist from Egypt, who fought to end FGM, who fought to end a lot of injustices and inequality for women. And we continue her fight and the fight of so many feminist women that we admire and we get inspired by every day to continue our work.
My heart is full. This was short, but it was amazing. So thank you both so much for all the work that you do. Aya, we are always with you. And Aliyah, we look forward to supporting you. Ending female genital mutilation is possible, but it is possible only if we bring young people to the table, if we give them the tool, and if we, as both of my colleagues have stated here, if we understand that they are leading and that they are ready to make that change. So I want to give it back to our colleagues, but thank you, Aya, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Aliyah, thank you so much. And hopefully I'll see you all in New York City for coffee soon. Peace and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Aya, Aliyah, and Aisata, for your very interesting fireside chat. We have learned quite a lot, and it's very interesting that you've highlighted a number of ways that youth can be engaged through looking at intersecting issues, harnessing the young people's voice, promoting intergenerational dialogue in order to close the knowledge gap. Thank you for that. And thank you, Aisata, also for moderating very well. We're now going to take 1 minute of silence for women and girls who live with the consequences of FGMC. Thank you. May we continue to keep survivors at the forefront of our efforts to end FGMC. We are going to hear from a youth activist from Vancouver, Canada. Now, Malaika Somji. Malaika co-founded the End FGM Canada network when she was 16 years old. She started her activism with an FGMC awareness campaign and a film screening at her school, and has since participated in various awareness campaigns throughout Canada network. Welcome, Malaika.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you to Aaliyah and Aya. That was everything you said was spot on. So I concur, and I thank you for all of your work. And I want to thank you all for your time. When I was 6 years old, in the comfort of my house in Toronto, Canada, I remember not knowing which toy I was going to choose to play with. At that same time, Grace, on the other side of the world in Tanzania, was also conflicted between two things her mother said. Don't let anyone touch your body, and this is what makes you a woman. When we were both 7, on a beautiful day, I ran behind a butterfly in our backyard, while Grace was running away after hearing she was next. Her family members pinned her down as she felt her flesh being cut off, until, screaming with agony, she passed out. Every 10 seconds, without consent or thought to human decency, a child is ripped away from her fundamental human rights because of female genital mutilation. I am one of 4 girls to my immigrant parents, with 2 siblings who in many other places in the world would be at the prime age for FGM, including Tanzania, where my father comes from. There was never a moment of doubt on whether I should join the fight to end FGM. I've been passionate about human rights since birth, and I know that there's only one side to be on, and that's to be an ally to these brave girls and women. I'm here today to celebrate young people's role in the advancement of human rights. I'm deeply inspired by the energy and passion we bring, knowing we have the ability to lead movements that change hearts and minds and make history. Throughout history and across the world, young people have been at the forefront of standing up for what is right. The past 10 years have brought forth so many challenges, but have been met with tremendous activism, notably by young people such as Malala, Greta Thunberg, and Amanda Gorman. In every region, people are working for hope, from the fight to inequality, racism, climate change, and repressive institutions, from the right to make informed decisions about our own bodies, to the right to participate in defining policies for our countries. I am inspired by the courage, clarity, and principle of young people rising peacefully to create greater freedom, opportunity, and justice for all. I constantly strive to teach myself and others about social issues, to acknowledge and understand years of sustained oppression and injustices, with female genital mutilation being one of the worst injustices. I speak up and confront many social issues that are often untouched and become trivialized due to the social refusal to acknowledge a gap in society as a prevailing problem. Problems such as female genital mutilation, where girls and women experience marginalization in a global context. How can this nonsense still be happening in the 21st century? As I'm sure you're all aware, female genital mutilation and its beliefs have immense human and social costs, with the risk of causing trauma and leading to problems related to girls' mental health and well-being. FGM has become so ingrained in communities over the generations that it's difficult for anyone to challenge it. Nevertheless, we must continue to persist in abolishing this human rights violation, and we must provide support to the survivors of FGM. I learned about FGM through a discussion at home a few years ago and was motivated by the injustices. I began to undertake my own research on the practice. After reading the different legislation across the world, I was shocked by the lack of prosecution for FGM offenses. I was fortunate to meet with the director of the documentary, In the Name of Your Daughter. It's the story about some of the most courageous girls in the world, children in northern Tanzania who are risking their lives to defy their destiny and follow their dreams. Rosie, one of the girls, heard about the harmful effects of FGM at school on the same day her mother told her Her time to be cut had come. Frightened, the 12-year-old tried to reason with her mother, but when she refused to listen, Rosie packed a few belongings in a plastic bag, pretended she was going to school, and ran to the safe house far from her home and family. As youth, we need to leverage our energies and our connections in our local community and beyond, and use any tools accessible to spread awareness and engage others in ending FGM. After meeting with the director, I brought the topic of FGM to my school and organized events such as social media campaigns, screening the documentary, and having the director come to speak. All these efforts were to educate students and teachers about FGM. I also created a petition urging the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, to take action, seeing that we have 100,000 or more survivors in Canada and possibly thousands of girls at risk. The petition has received nearly 7,000 signatures. When myself and 3 other women co-founded the End FGM Canada Network, we attended the Women Deliver conference in Vancouver in 2019, where we were able to connect with amazing networks working towards the same goal. We later hosted several other screenings in our community and continued expanding our network through social media and campaigns. What started as a simple conversation has created a network of people and communities working together to end FGM. I'm now 18 years old and deciding on what law school I'm going to attend next year, while Grace, the little girl that was cut, is now a woman and a mother to 3 young children at 18, unable to get an education and is stuck in the same cycle caused by FGM. To policymakers and governments, I urge you to listen to these calls of action. Respect us and our voices. In response, we demand more effective and more principled policies, but more importantly, prosecution and support for survivors and girls at risk. Every girl has the right to live free from discrimination on any grounds. Every girl has the right to access education, healthcare, economic opportunities, and a decent standard of living. Every girl has the right not to have our genitals mutilated. This is about our future, our livelihoods, our freedoms, our security, and our dreams. We are urging governments to pay attention, to engage and invest in progress and in helping us young activists. The lack of action from governments is costing these women and girls security and support. How can world governments remain silent when women across the globe are screaming out for action? FGM is a human rights violation, a horrific act of violence against defenseless girls by those trusted to protect them. The scars it leaves are more than physical, as lifelong trauma is inflicted on girls. Action must be taken, not just by the people of one nation, but by the whole world, regardless of your gender, religion, nationality, or ethnicity, to stamp out this cruelty. Girls and boys, women and men stand with one another in this fight to end FGM. Our future is at stake, and the future of all of those who have not yet been born. We will have to bear the full consequences of the actions or lack of action. The same applies to those running governments and large corporations, the decision makers on whom the future of individual countries, regions, and the planet as a whole depend. So to the youth, I say, we must continue raising our voices. To the boys and men in our society, I say, stand up for your sisters and daughters. Protect them and allow them to speak up and be heard. It is essential to the creation of a future of peace, justice, and sustainable economic development. Our voices are the living expression of human rights, a movement that is fundamentally about building dignity and equality for everyone. We need to mobilize across the world peacefully and powerfully to advance a world of rights. With renewed determination, we all need to stand up for human rights and girls' rights. We are powerful torchbearers for a brighter future. To all the young people working tirelessly towards creating a better world, I see you, hear you, and stand with you. Continue to march against corruption, repression, and inequality for human rights and dignity. Soon, I'll be going to university to pursue my dreams, and someday when I get married and have children of my own, and if I have a daughter, I want her to be chasing after butterflies, laughing without a care in the world, alongside all the other kids in the world. Every girl should be protected from female genital mutilation. Let's end FGM for girls like Grace and all the other Graces who long to follow their dreams the way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Malaika, for that very passionate presentation. Thank you for highlighting the fact that FGMC is a human rights violation and it's injustice perpetuated on women and girls in FGMC practicing communities. Thanks also for bringing out the call to support survivors regarding their healthcare, their mental health care, the legal and even prosecution of cases. I'm now pleased to introduce Mariam Sheikh. Mariam has been a human rights campaigner for decades. She has worked at the grassroots and national policy levels to combat gender-based violence in Kenya. Mariam moved to Canada in the fall of 2019 to protect her then 9-year-old daughter from FGMC. Mariam is a survivor of FGMC. Welcome, Mariam.
Hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for having me today. I am really pleased to be among activists and people who are working for an issue that I'm very, very passionate about. Female genital mutilation is a personal issue for me. As you said rightly, I am a survivor. I was cut at 6 years old. I remember that day and I remember everything. I remember the pain. I remember the sound of the razor. I remember the ridicule and the laughters of the women. I remember the immediate aftermath once the nerves picked. I remember it as if it happened yesterday. 43 years after, even I smell blood, my mind goes back to that very spot of where I was cut and how it was done. The most rewarding and challenging decision I had to make was actually becoming an FGM, anti-FGM activist, wanting to end female genital mutilation. And I say this because every time I visit, I talk about female genital mutilation, I revisit that pain. I go back to that very spot. Every time someone belittles the cause, someone questions why we are all of a sudden questioning the culture of the community. Anytime someone says, nothing big happened, you have survived, you're here, you're older now. Anytime someone just makes any question around FGM, it's like there is this inner wound where they'll be rubbing a palm full of salt with. That is how much it is a personal issue for me. Nobody forgets. No one actually gets over it. This is a lifetime thing. It shares a life with you, and nobody deserves to be taken through what I went through. I had to imagine a young girl who is being held down somewhere today as we sit here, who is going to go through this cut, because it is a fact, it's happening in the world. It's a global issue, as we all know. I have lived with some of its impact and I'm still living it. It has long-term impacts. So it's not something where you get up, the wound heals, and that is it. It actually shares a lifetime with you. But one thing that has been heartwarming for me is realizing that, one, if first of all I was able to change, after all the indoctrination, being taken through the practice, knowing it had to happen, all the excuses and the lies that I was told, that this thing is Islamic, it is our culture, it's how it has to be. If I got a mind change, it is possible to have a mind change in the community I come from, in all the other communities and across the world. it is possible to have a mind change around FGM and get people to say no to this practice and save girls from this horrendous pain. It's not even enough to say pain. It's beyond pain. I don't know how to describe that pain. My journey has been with a lot of highs and with a lot of lows. And my mind change came through what I usually call an accidental conversation. But today we are so lucky that we have proven, tested strategies that we can come up with to inject the needed change in communities. We have almost scientific steps that we can actually use to be able to have the kind of mindset that change that we require in the different communities that are practicing female genital mutilation. I hold that I was not cut and I was not circumcised. I hold that I was mutilated. Healthy, functional organs were gotten rid of in my body. I don't know how or what until later in my life is when I came to realize what was actually even gotten rid of. Many survivors do not know what was even taken off their bodies. This is what we are talking about when we talk about female genital mutilation. But it is possible to change people. My accidental conversation was with a friend at the university who wondered why I got so sick, why I was always very ill when it got to that month of the month when I had my periods. And I told her, well, you know, I wasn't circumcised like you are, like that's the term we were using that time. And she was like, what do you mean? I told her, yeah, you know, Muslim girls are cut in this mild way. For us, we have this cultural practice, which is very severe. This was the script in my head. My friend was shocked and she told me that she was not cut. She doesn't know what I'm talking about. It was my turn to be shocked also. What do you mean that you're not cut? How are you praying? How are your prayers being accepted? How are you a Muslim? This is the narrative that was in my head, that you cannot be a complete Muslim unless you are cut. But that day, that shock planted a seed of doubt in my head. And I wondered, who was on the right between us? Why is she saying she's not cut, yet she's a Muslim? I see her, she's clad in her buibui. She is praying with me, we fast with her. I mean, we do basically everything that we are required. What is it that, why is she saying, and why was I lied to? Then I'll begin to be very angry. I was angry for a very long time. I don't even know against who or to who, or my anger wasn't directed to anyone in particular. But I was very angry for a long time because it took 11 years to get an answer to that. Who was on the right between she and I? But before that 11 years, I had another shock. After Beijing happened, I came across a document that said many Muslim communities believe female genital mutilation is obligatory in Islam, yet it is only, you will hear me use this term only once today, Sunnah, yet it's only Sunnah. Sunnah in Islam means an optional practice. It means a practice, if you do, you get blessings, you get thawab for it. I couldn't reconcile what I went through and how bad it was. First of all, it was reassuring to know that it was not obligatory. But just to be told again that it is optional, again in the religion, I couldn't reconcile. I wanted an answer to tell me, no, it had nothing, no relation in totality. I got that answer 11 years after. 11 years of turmoil, of wanting to do something about it, but being so ignorant, not knowing who to turn to, not knowing who to ask any question, being in this family that were still cutting their girls, even when I tell them, please stop trying to stop my nieces. And I couldn't, because everyone believed it is religious. I got the most liberating piece of information that FGM is not Islamic. It has no basis in Islam. In fact, it goes against the Islamic teachings on the sanctity of the human body and takes away the rights that women and girls have been given, including the right to life. Many girls have died immediately after the cut. many women have died as a result of the long-term impact of this practice. And that was the turning point I needed, 360 degrees turn. And I decided this is something that I was going to do. It's been very difficult, as I said, but also very rewarding. There are very many friends today who live out there who have named even their daughters after me, who call them Mariam, because they have decided they're not going to be cut, and that was the only name that befits them. It is easy to change. We only need to be very strategic and be able to use the kind of strategies that will work with particular communities. So I'm not going to bore you guys with all the pain and all these issues, because these are things that I know you know. But today I just want to look at some of the missing gaps, some of the gaps a bit in our work, and also leave you guys with a question on the table. I would like us to increase our global solidarity. Solidarity in terms of knowledge sharing, solidarity in terms of the agitation for change, solidarity in terms of making governments across everywhere take up the mantle and to begin to save young girls from this practice, because FGM is a global issue. It is no longer an over there issue, it's everywhere. And also for governments to be able to respond to the needs of survivors in their countries. I now live in Canada. I came to Canada for studies, but one of the push factors, one of the reasons why I chose to come for studies, the time I chose, is because of my daughter. She was 9 years then, and it was getting to her. Everyone was reminding her of how she's going to be ugly and she will smell. And the most scariest time is when she was told, you're going to grow organs that will be long and look like snakes. And she was like, she didn't want to grow snakes down there. So I knew even if I protect her from the physical cutting, I won't be able to protect her from the psychological impact of the shaming that those words were doing. So I decided I'll take off, come here. But when I came to Canada, I found a wall of silence. There's a wall of silence in this country. And I think End FGM Canada Network was started, and it needs all our global support. We need to be more conscious on the terminology we use depending on who we are engaging. And back home, if you look back at the work I used to do before, we used FGMC, female genital mutilation stroke cutting, because my community, the Somali, have decided that FGM is only type 3. So if you say stop FGM, for them it's like, yes, you're stopping type 3, which they all say we want to stop, even though they continue doing it. There is that other side that they want to do. It breaks my heart when I see a billboard that's written in English, let's stop FGM, but when they write in Somali, Georgia Gudninka Fir'auniga, stop the pharaonic circumcision, which is type 3. And that is a funded program. I know that was not the intention, but that is happening. It breaks my heart when I see documents that refer to FGM as Sunnah. We need to refrain from it. We need to stop the cross-purpose messaging. You can't call something religious and then you want it stopped, because that is cross-purpose messaging. Today, I want to leave you with this question. How have we done with the generational change issue? I think we are almost 10, 15 years since we started looking at that and using that kind of strategy to want to work towards a generational change. How are we doing? How serious have we been? Because if we are still talking about youth not being involved because they are the leaders of tomorrow, I had a geometrical set that had viongozi wa kesho back in school, which meant the leaders of tomorrow. I am 50 next year. I haven't had a chance to be in leadership until now through maybe government and all that. So when are we going to give our youth the space that they need? We need, yes, to have generational dialogue, but we also need to have a stop between these two generations. We need to engage the youth right from when they're in school all the way and try and work with them through these trajectories of being in school, in college, maybe working, being in marriage and new parents. Link them up with maybe support people and mentors from the community like myself. If someone is from my community, let me be linked up with young people who have just become parents so that they really stop cutting their girls. There are a lot of doubts and a lot of questions and a lot of fears people would have. The families that have stopped cutting, their girls, what are we doing about them? How are we working with them also? The girls still are being ridiculed, are being shamed. They still live in that fear. Are we going to lose them to FGM? That's my fear. There's a study that we did sometimes back, and through the alternative rite of passage, girls, when they went through school, even being given scholarships, they came back, and to fit in, they are the ones who beat up their drums. We don't want to repeat the same thing. So how are we working with these young girls and their families also? These are the questions I want to leave you guys with. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for working towards ending genital mutilation. As a survivor, it gives me hope that there are people who care and humanity out there that stands up for girls and their bodies and their rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for sharing your experience with us today. For highlighting the long-term physical and mental health consequences of the practice, and also for bringing about the issue of the accidental conversation that triggered your shift in thinking around the practice of FGMC, hence the need for us to really scale up our awareness and sensitization programs, delinking the practice from the Islam religion, and your call for global solidarity and the proper naming of the FGMC relevant to the context where we work. Thank you also for your passion to protect your daughter from it. So following Mariam's talk, we're going to move into a fireside style chat to discuss mental health and survivor advocacy and allyship with Leila Hussein and Maria Taher. Dr. Leila Hussein is a psychotherapist specializing in supporting survivors of sexual abuse. She is an international lecturer on female genital mutilation and global speaker on gender rights. Leila is currently Global Advocacy Director and Deputy Team Leader for the African-led movement to end FGMC. Maria Taher is co-founder and US Executive Director of SEHIO, an award-winning transnational organization with the mission to empower Asian communities to end FGMC. She's named one of the 6 experts to watch on the issue of female genital mutilation stroke cutting by News Deeply. Maria has worked in gender-based violence for over a decade and in the areas of teaching, research, policy, program development, and direct service. Welcome, Leila and Maria.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asha. Just trying to find Leila on my screen.
I'm here. I can definitely see you.
Great. But yes, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here to speak with my friend and colleague, Leila, on this really important topic around mental health and survivor advocacy and also just allyship in general. And I feel like we've been hearing a lot about these topics from the other speakers already. So I'm glad we're actually continuing the conversation around these ideas. So Leila, I'm just gonna actually jump right in because I know we don't have a lot of time and this is a big topic. But for my first question to you really is, since these topics have already risen up in this conversation, and I know you've heard a lot on these terms in connection to your work on FGMC for decades as well, could you tell me a little bit about what the idea of survivor-centered or survivor-led advocacy means to you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. Actually, I feel very emotional, actually, just seeing everybody come together like this. I've been involved in this for 18 years, so just seeing how, but also before we start, Maria, I think it's important to acknowledge, because, earlier on, the younger generation acknowledged me and a couple of other people. Listen, I'm glad to be the new oldie in this movement, but I think it's important to acknowledge, I think Nawal was acknowledged, Nawal Sadawi, Efo Dokunu, Janet Fayo, women like Joanna Vergov, who's really been a big part of my work in my early therapy work, Toby Levine, Kadi Koita. I think it's important that we remember the other women whose shoulders I stood on. So what does survivor advocacy look like? This is a very important question. I think we need to first think about what we mean by survivor advocacy. I think that's a word that's been thrown around quite a lot in this space. My concern has always been, if an organization wants to work with a survivor, does the organization actually have the capacity to support them physically, emotionally, socially? Because you and I both know, we both sit in those positions. We don't go into work like our other employers, our colleagues, because you and I are talking about something that we experience on a daily basis, which already has an impact. So survivor-led advocacy, it's very important. However, we need to think about really carefully in terms of what that actually means. So we need to create a safe space. We need to remember we cannot treat them like any other colleague because they have a specific need. So I noticed listening to the earlier conversation, it was very triggering. Few people have shared their experience. I've experienced this at the age of 7. I know you experienced that at a very young age. So we have to be very mindful. So survivor-led advocacy is absolutely key. It's our voice. People are hearing us. We are speaking from that space. But do we have the capacity? And I would really urge all the organizations who are here today to really think about what that means, because what has happened over and over again, where survivors have been put at the forefront without any support, have had breakdowns, extreme resentment, because what you're doing, remember, FGM happens so publicly and it's very humiliating. What organizations are doing, if they don't give the right support, you're repeating the same behavior. So you're also responsible for repeating that abuse over and over again. I mean, what was your experience? Sorry, Mara, I want to ask you what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, everything you're bringing up just kind of rings bells for me too. I was actually just thinking about how a few years ago, one of the things that SAO did was we conducted a needs assessment and specifically like what kind of support, what can we do to those who are community-based or survivor-based who are advocates too. And, one of the biggest things was creating that space, creating that support for that support system in general, because this isn't easy as well, and I think that if you're trying to do that work, boundaries are important too, but also kind of recognizing if you are maybe not even in that place to do advocacy, and that's completely okay and makes sense. And I think that there needs to be a recognition that just because you've experienced this, it might not mean that you can be an advocate on this issue. And it's not your responsibility to also be an advocate on this issue too. I think I agree with you completely that we need that bottom-up survivor-led, community-led organization, but it doesn't mean necessarily that everyone can do it or is ready to.
I mean, one of the things I'm really proud of with the Africa-led movement work, we've developed a do no harm framework and well-being. It's really key to every single part of the work we will be delivering, because fundamentally, it's not just the survivors. We have to think about everybody involved in that work, those delivering the work, those who we're going to be working with, and how that's going to impact everybody. So I think that conversation has to be ongoing.
Yeah. And I think one other things, and I'm sure, I know that you're a psychotherapist, so you're well aware of this too, but is that not just in this profession and this field, but, working in gender-based violence too, just across the board, there is that real vicarious trauma, secondary trauma that can occur when you're working on those issues. And I know for myself, when I think about my mental health, a lot of times that actually is not necessarily related to the experience I had as a child, but it is more so this ongoing kind of journey and sort of the backlash and dealing with it and like having to talk about this or just being overworked or, those are the things that really for me personally kind of impact my own mental health and well-being. And I feel like it's something that we need to talk more about just in general too.
But also I think it's remembering especially when we're talking about within the context of FGM, it's mainly women of color. So if a woman speaks out, she gets we can never compare it to male activists. We can't, because women activists, the threats are, we're going to rape you, we're going to kill you, we're going to torture you. So that's the kind of level of trauma we are impacted by on it. And if you're a woman of color, it's a whole different experience. And women of color usually are put in situations where they constantly have to explain how bad this actually was. And I feel like that with FGM. It's constantly, we have to explain that pinning a child to a table, spreading their legs apart, forget the cutting, touching their genitalia, it's abuse. It's a form of sexual abuse. I think we have to call it for what it is. As a therapist, one thing I learned is it's very important I name what my clients are describing to me. I wouldn't do them any justice. And I think what's been missing in these conversations, we're constantly tiptoeing around what's happened to us. And I love what Marion was saying. That was her experience that she was mutilated. You can't take that away. It's offensive when we are not actually naming this for what it is. And I find that really frustrating. And I know there's a conversation around race that needs to be had. You wouldn't be scared to call this what it is if it was a white girl. Why can't we call it if it's a woman of color? So by not calling it for what it is, then you are racist, because you're saying women that look like me, my daughter, don't deserve similar justice or even be named. And that itself has an emotional, because we constantly have to convince people this was bad. That's really where we are still. We have to convince people this was terrible.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And you just sort of made me think of, and something that Mariam just mentioned in the previous conversation and what she was talking about FGMC, and in her own community, seeing that people were, saying FGM as infibulation, but not the less severe forms were okay. And that's something we see in I grew up in the Bora community, and we see that all the time. And I know that that's something that's very similar for a lot of Asian communities, because there isn't enough data or research, but from sort of my own understanding, they do more type 1, type 2, and that's a whole different conversation. But I think it doesn't matter the type or anything. I think
absolutely. But I'm actually saying, forget the cutting. No, I really, because I think it's, let's forget the cutting. Yeah. Just forget the cutting part right now. Pinning a child, spreading their legs apart, in front of you publicly. It's done so publicly. I think that's what people don't need to understand. And touching someone's genitalia is already a crime, is a sexual assault crime. Yeah. When you take a blade to that, the legal term for that is serial sexual assault. So what we are talking about is a serial sexual assault of children. Once you put it in that frame, there's no argument on how we deal with this. We know exactly how to deal with it, but also you're not giving those of us who've experienced this the justice and the language. And usually the people who don't want to call it for what it is are people who haven't experienced it. They're in a position of power. So it's really important. Forget the cutting. It has to me, that's, yes, physically there's different types of damaging, but that child has already been violated just based, and remember, it's done by people you trust the most. Because many people say to me, the women never come forward. Why would a child come forward when the people who did this to them was their own family to follow up with the party? If those of us outside are not outraged. Yeah. So
I completely agree with you there. I was also just sort of thinking about, yes, we need to forget the type of cutting in terms of the overall awareness that what is being done is child abuse. I also feel like there is you brought up sort of racial undertones, and I feel like working from the Asian kind of community perspective, there are inherent racial undertones there too, where we see in the Bora community as well, unfortunately, where there is this narrative going around that what they're doing in Africa is FGM, and that's so wrong in so many different ways. But it's like another layer that we're having to work around too, and it's even othering within Black and Brown communities too, which is an interesting kind of not phenomenon, I don't know what the right word is, but it is something that we need to really look at and examine and try to, and it goes back to like recognizing what you were saying, all of it is a form of abuse.
Listen, globally, this is facts, the most vulnerable human being in the world is the Black African child, girl child, okay? And there's a reason, hence why FGM has been ignored this whole time, hence why any girl of color are not taken seriously in this. But for me, it's like we need to question ourselves. Why? Sorry, my alarm just went off for some reason. That's weird. Yeah. So for me, again, it's really, we cannot have a discussion around FGM without discussing race, gender, and sexuality, because that's why. Because FGM fundamentally happens because we are controlling female sexuality. Call it, you can go around calling it lots of other things. It's really to control. I will never forget a Kenyan activist once said to me, Layla, my people are not stupid. They knew what they were doing. There's a reason why they never cut my hands or feet, because they needed for me to work in the house and in the farm. They cut my genitalia to control my sexuality, but they're so smart. They made the others think this is okay. Yeah. I would never forget that thing, because really, we really cannot, especially those of us on this call, we are in a position of power, call it for what it is, because you have no idea what the damaging it does when someone tells me, well, isn't that your culture? No, it's not my culture. My culture, there's no violence. My culture, there's music and there's food, lots of love and lots of hugs. Done. I will not claim FGM as my culture as an African woman. So we need to stop others for pushing this narrative on us. Because let me tell you, Maria, if this was blonde, blue-eyed girl, there'll be an outrage. Even this pandemic, every 11 seconds, a girl's being cut globally. Where's the outrage? Where the hell is the outrage? This is a pandemic and we need to recognize it as that.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Unfortunately, I know that we're running out of time here, but I love
this conversation.
I know, I wish we could talk more about this. I mean, I'm so glad that we're able to bring up these points and this conversation, and I'm hoping that everyone here will, continue these conversations and start to think about this. And I guess I just want to end with Layla. Like, if you've already shared so much, but if there's anything else that you would like to just mention before we end and move on.
I mean, one, we run the Dahlia Project. We currently, that's the counseling service for FGM survivors. Our plan is actually to go global, because now we can go online and run these sessions online for women all over the world, which that should be announced very soon. And we are currently with Dr. Tamri and some others on this call. We are part of the team who are going to be leading the current Africa-led movement, because Africa is leading this work, I promise you, except the West refuses to acknowledge it or see it. And I'm very grateful for the UK government for putting in that resource there. So I cannot wait until we share that work in the next couple of months.
I can't wait either. I think we can learn a lot from this work. And we've learned a lot from, just to take it back to what you said originally, from everyone that has come before us as well in this work. So thank you again, Layla, so much. I always
thank you for having me. And I want to come to that coffee in New York.
Yeah, can you be part of that?
Too. Yeah. Maybe I can join you virtually if we're not allowed to travel. All right, thanks everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Layla and Maria, for that very interesting conversation. You've raised quite important points. Also, thank you for bringing up the issue that we need to recognize the women that were our forerunners in this work. Also speaking about the aims of survivor-led advocacy to support physically, emotionally, mentally the survivors, creating safe spaces, and thinking around the sensitivity of the issue, the importance of having the do no harm and safeguarding frameworks in all the work that we do. And also to call it as it is, to name and frame the practice as violence and also as sexual assault, and not as a cultural traditional practice. And this is regardless of the type of FGM that we are looking at. Thank you for that. So before we move to the closing remarks, we are going to hear from Josephine Kiaga, a 19-year-old filmmaker who aspires to be a creative leader in Tanzania, a public advocate for her politics, particularly human equality and equal opportunities for women in Tanzania. Josephine wrote this poem when she was 15 years old. She first shared it in Arusha, Tanzania during the premiere screening of a documentary called In the Name of Your Daughter, a heartbreaking and heartwarming story of the most courageous girls in the world, children in northern Tanzania who are risking their lives to save themselves from female genital mutilation, stroke cutting, and child marriage. Josephine was unable to join us live today. However, we are fortunate to have a video she recorded of her performing the poem.
Our silent voices, crying as we run, step after step, heavy. Our life is cursed. We are doomed. Our suitors wait. We are locked in a room. Our silent voices are speaking loud with courage of our protest to be loved and encouraged. They will not feel our burden nor see our dreams destroyed. We simply want to study, to be employed. This loss of my blood could lead to death. Can you not see you've committed theft? You've taken my life and left me wrecked for a life branded by pain and regret. You'd rather that than have me enabled. Girls should not be cut. The effects are not few. All of this information is not new. Save your sisters. Don't send them to the knife. With courage we'll stand. We've earned our fight. We are not cash for your cows. We should not be branded. Why should we stand alone? Why should we be stranded? We will stand up for our rights. This is what we deserve. Our value is not in your cows. It does not lie in the herd. Like my brother, I want to be educated. Like my father, I want to be liberated. I'm dying of uncontrollable bleeding. I'm crying. I'm crying for reading. Our silent voices are speaking loud with courage. Our lives have value. We will not be disparaged. I would like to tell our girls that if you're threatened with blades, you should fight for your right. Don't let it drive you insane. I want to ask our fathers, don't cut your daughters like a cow that you've sent to be slaughtered. Take a moment to pause. Think of life of pain. Mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers. Our silent voices cry, please, dear fathers and brothers, don't mutilate me. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine, for your powerful words. It is now my pleasure to introduce Kerry Walovich, who will provide some closing remarks. Kerry is Operations and Partnerships Manager for the US End FGMC Network and a member of the Global Platform for Action to End FGMC. Thank you so much for joining us now. I will now hand over to Kerry. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you, Dr. Esho, and thank you everyone who has spoken today. We're so grateful for the expertise, the insights, and the stories our speakers have shared today. This gathering of advocates, survivors, and allies is another reminder of how impactful and dedicated our community is to ending female genital mutilation cutting around the world. I would also like to extend our thanks to all of you, the participants, for your time and engagement. We have a final activity to end our session today. We'd like to take a moment and ask all of you to write down and share your commitment for ending female genital mutilation cutting in your community, your country, or on a global scale. If you have a small piece of paper, a notebook, or if you don't have paper near you, feel free to post in the chat box as well. The task is write down your commitment and then hold it up to your camera if you're comfortable with us sharing this commitment with everyone in attendance. So I'll give everyone about 30 seconds to a minute to write down your answer. And then with your permission, I'd like to read some of the responses to the group. So I'll put on a timer. You can go ahead now for about 30 seconds or so and write down. Again, you can write down anything that comes to mind. Don't worry about spelling or making your thoughts a full sentence. No answer is wrong. About 15 seconds left. Okay, great. Please continue to finish your thoughts. I will start us off. And here's my commitment. Here in the United States, I commit to reach out and urge my elected officials to continue supporting legislation at the state and federal levels to protect all individuals from FGMC. Please feel free to hold up your commitments if you're comfortable. I'd love to read some out loud. I will start with the chat box. So Patricia from There Is No Limit Foundation says, ending FGMC so that girls can live to their fullest potential. Jana has said, committed to continue engaging with this issue personally and through my organization with the CODA Alliance. From Miriam, to continue to use my voice on my pain so that another girl is not pained. From Isa, I am a father on a mission to ensure that my 2-year-old or any girl in my community in Kenya will not see the blade. Thank you, Isa. And Esmail, dear future daughter, I promise you that you will not undergo FGM. I will protect you. You will flourish. You will get an education. You will prosper. They're all beautiful. Thank you. So thank you again, everyone. And Dr. Leila Hussein, Dear FGM survivors, you will get justice. And Giselle, I will continue to break the silence in Canada. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts, and please feel free to continue putting your thoughts into the chat box and sharing them with the group. Faith, I commit to promote international conversations and actions toward ending FGMC in Kenya. Anne-Marie, I will continue to research FGMC via 28 Too Many to end FGMC by 2030. Great. And yes, Jana said, please put your social media handles here. That would be great. We would love to also to tag you and continue having this conversation around our commitments to end FGMC. And as we close today's session, we'd like to also invite you to continue uniting forces with the global platform by signing up to our global call to action. The link should be on the screen, and I've also added it to the chat. And by signing on to this global call, you will add your voice to our movement, calling for urgent action to accelerate ending FGMC by 2030. The global platform will utilize support for this call to action to continue advocating for greater prioritization, resourcing, and action to end FGMC. And finally, I'd like to end by reminding everyone listening that there are many varied and important roles for people like us to play in this work, for everyone to play in this work. A role for women and girls, men and boys, and advocates, however they define themselves. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, brothers, sisters, sons and daughters, families, and friends. We all have a vital part to play in this movement, whether it's raising awareness and sensitization of female genital mutilation and cutting in your local community, advocating for change among your youth peers, partnering with governments to end the medicalization of FGMC, or creating safe spaces and support systems for survivors. As you've all shown here today, we as a global community must continue to foster dialogue on this topic across different generations, communities, and beliefs. We will continue to discuss the barriers we face to ending this violent practice and celebrate our successes, big and small. Together, we can end FGMC. Again, thank you for participating and attending. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day and evening, and we look forward to continuing our dialogues and discussions. And thank you again for coming.